yeah, as Lizzy said, please be yourselves. Don't worry about making noise on the podcast. It's, part and parcel of what we do in terms of interviewing artists who are also parents and have other responsibilities. So,
and you're all fine with swearing, aren't you? So is that okay with everyone else if we need to swear? Is that okay with you guys?
I'm going to swear twice.
Okay.
At least twice. I'm definitely going to once say fuck and once say shit. Just
okay, so Kate's broken Sue.
I can't promise anything else. But that's a given.
Okay, so hello and welcome to our very first live Woman Up episode, our live on tour episode. Can we have a little woohoo from everyone, please? Woo! Yeah, that's exciting. Today we're recording from the Exeter Phoenix in front of a small, gorgeous audience. And our partners here for this episode are Mothers Who Make Exeter. I'm your host, Susan Merrick, and I'm here in Exeter with my amazing co-producer, Amy Dignam, who is just behind you guys. She's working behind the scenes on the episode, and we're very lucky to be talking today to Lizzy Humber, one of the founders of Mothers Who Make, and artists Dr. Kate Massey-Chase and Amy Adkin. So I'm going to do a little bit of introduction. I'd like to ask Lizzy in a minute to tell me about Mothers Who Make, because there's lots to talk about there. So I'd like you to introduce that, if that's okay, Lizzy. But Lizzy Humber is a producer who creates opportunities for mothers in Exeter and Devon to explore art and connect to their identities, also modelling spaces where children are welcome. Dr. Kate Massey-Chase is a facilitator, academic, activist, performer and writer. She's a lecturer at Plymouth Mahjong Uni.
Mahjong.
No, I knew it was going to work.
It's because we spoke about it.
Oh, exactly. Leading a new MA in Arts, Health and Wellbeing. She's worked across educational and community settings, including delivering theatre-based and creative writing projects with young migrants, recovering addicts, prisoners and mental health service users. Sorry, I was just trying to read my writing. Her recent research centres on mental health service transition and aesthetics of care, and Kate lives in Exeter with her wife, their energetic toddler and newborn baby, and 2 cats. Amy is a writer, a performer and therapy assistant based in Devon. Amy's worked in graphic design, marketing and teaching, and has lived in Greece and Austria. Amy engages with various art forms to explore connection, language, grief and memory. And she lives with her husband, 2 children and a mischievous cat. There's a bit of a theme going on there. And the nature of making work when you're a parent is that you're constantly interrupted. So we felt it appropriate to begin the space today with an interruption.
The myth, the mother. And so I am Sisyphus still, rolling my Henry Hoover up a dust-draggled hill, wiping the replenishing slime and grime from behind the kitchen sink taps, over and over. Or I am Ariadne, tangled in the strings of 1,000 things that I need to remember, trapped in a maze made of Duplo pieces and Scarlet socks. I am Pandora, with Cassandra's eyes, when in those bewitched hours that lie between tea time and before bed, I open the hidden toy box under the stairs, knowing and not knowing that an unleashed wave of flashing lights plastic is what's known in the trade as a bad idea for bedtime. And yet, it's open now, and shrieks of nymphish delight bounce off the walls of a suddenly too small, too wild playroom. But when the 3-headed hydra, that many-tongued beast, tidy up time, lumbers into view, watch my Icarus wings melt away in the heat of those small stamping feet, that purple rage uncaged and flailing, and the Nemean lion that this Hercules is trying and failing to tame, until my Midas mother touch spins golden smiles across their faces and I'm lost. I'm Narcissus, drowned deep in my image that I spy in the pools of their eyes. Look, mummy, a daffodil. Then, when the odyssey of the night begins, I'm dragging Achilles' heels and bones on another sleepless, dreamless journey, cot to bed, to chair, to bed, to cot, weak at the knees from the ceaseless rocking seas of the deep sleep dance. Oh, let me be Endymion, granted endless, velvet, soft breast. Or the many-eyed Argus, perhaps all-seeing, ready to act, catching falling plates before they shatter, and toddler hands before they clatter on icy winter pavements. And if we receive judgmental stares from a passerby who dares to ape the gods and ask, "Oh, hasn't she any gloves? She must be cold, poor love." Let hissing fill the silence between my lips. Let stone-cold snakes be companions that grip my Medusa temples as I strike this stranger down with just one look. Perhaps not. Back to your caves, monsters, heroes. Back into the pages of books. But be warned, my mythological motherhood is much more epic than it looks.
So that was Laura Free, who is an Exeter-based mother, poet, performer and teacher. We also have Micha Colombo joining us today, who's an actor, playwright, poet and storyteller. Both Laura and Micha will be interrupting the episode throughout, as we go along.
Can I just say, it was so nice to see Laura's daughter Ada watching her, and you could hear her probably on the record saying, "Mummy." I was so proud. You could just see.
It was perfect timing as well. She knew exactly when to come in. It was Lizzy, I'd like to ask you about Mothers Who Make, for any of the listeners or anyone in the audience who might not know about it, a little bit about how it started and then how you came to bring it to Exeter.
Yeah, so I think Mothers Who Make began by accident with Matilda Lyster, who's a theatre maker and writer based in London, and an associate artist with a company called Improbable. And in 2014, faced with challenges of how she continued her making identity alongside her own motherhood, she had questions, and so she brought a group of women together to talk about that through a peer support meeting at the South Bank Centre. And loads of people showed up, and she accidentally founded a movement and a peer support network. And meetings began to be held in London, and then other people were like, "Oh, I'd like to hold one in my local arts centre or my local library." And so on a monthly basis across the country and now internationally and online, we hold spaces for mothers, and we're introducing the / between the M and the O, and not using the mother's term too exclusively. So it's people that care and birth as well. But to talk about how their creative identity sits alongside their caring roles. And that can be a professional identity, how they maintain a career alongside parenthood, or it can be about connection to creative self and how important the arts are to our sense of being and connection. And then I came to Mothers Who Make in 2015 when I was pregnant and questioning how on earth I was going to do it. I was working as a producer in the city, and my career had only just started to form after the financial crash. I had been in this wasteland of trying to create a career for myself in the arts, and it was only just starting to happen. And I was working 4 jobs, and I was touring, because I was also an actor. And then suddenly I told one of my employers I was pregnant, and they told me they were disappointed that I wasn't going to be able to finish the contract, and I basically became ostracised by... I wasn't being asked for opportunities anymore, and I could see that my new status as a mother was not of interest to people. So I came to Mothers Who Make one-off meeting here at Exeter Phoenix with Matilda, and it blew my mind open, and I went, oh, there's another way of doing this. I should be really proud of being a mother, because I felt excited I was going to become a mum. And I thought, no, I'm not going to compromise. I'm going I'm going to create a career for myself, but I can see there's inequalities here that I want to talk about. So I founded a group here in 2018 at the Phoenix in Exeter, and we've been meeting ever since on a monthly basis to hold peer support sessions. It's a really simple setup. It's a talking circle. It gives people time to connect with themselves, but to listen. And so often the word artist is quite scary, we find. People don't like to identify themselves as artists, but it's quite a female trait, I think, talking yourself down. And so when you mix motherhood into that, you know, women's confidence often becomes impacted. So yeah, it's a space where people can come together and talk about the complexities of that and reconnect with their identity and find community and communion, I think. And then as a result of that, I've been listening to so many stories over the years that I would say my artistry is producing and dreaming up projects. And so I've developed Mothers on the Mic, which is a programme supporting women to explore comedy, poetry, storytelling, music, audio, and then I run open mic events where we have worked with lots of women to teach them new skills or develop existing ones, and then they get on the mic and they amplify their voices and their stories. And so that's been really fun, working on daytime shows. And with everything, kids are welcome and have equal status in the room. So it's quite revolutionary and radical. And you have to remind people it's okay to exist as you are. You don't have to be a perception of professional or how an audience should exist with your children. You can just be yourself, and you never need to say sorry for existing and that your kids need to make noise. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's some of the things that I'm working on.
Yeah. I know that there are a few people in the room here who've been part of the Mothers on the Mic.
Yeah.
Amy, it'd be great if I could hear about how that's been for you, because I believe it's kind of reconnected you to your art in.
Yes, completely. Well, it's been an incredible experience, and I've been really fortunate that Lizzy's year-long Mothers on the Mic project has coincided with my second maternity leave, which showed a sort of stark contrast to my first maternity leave, which was very much about baby groups, which have their places as well, but I felt I didn't have as much of an identity during that first maternity. And then during the second maternity and being involved in this wonderful project, I've really had a sort of creative awakening. So I started with a couple of poetry workshops. And the first poetry workshop I attended with my 5-week-old baby, and it was just absolutely incredible to be able to be creative, to have permission to be myself, to connect with other creative people, and just play. You know, explore and play, and what an opportunity as well to, you know, to be able to do a course or do workshops led by other artists, you know, with your baby by your side. I also did the comedy course, which was a 6-week course led by Bristol-based Angie Belcher, and all of that under the umbrella of Lizzy Humber's Mothers on the Mic project, and that was absolutely brilliant. So during that course, we came together as mothers and we learnt about comedy, about theory, we got to play, we got to write and to perform. So we had all of those creative aspects, but it was also quite therapeutic. So within that, within those exercises, we've got to go within, think about who we are to ourselves, who we are in relation to the world, and then look back on our lives, you know, and think about experiences through a comedic lens, but of course it was a lot about identity, and exploring that and coming together with other creative mothers. So it's been really invigorating, really inspiring, and I feel incredibly fortunate to have been a part of this. And it's sort of contributed to my creative reawakening that I spoke about, which happened, I think, maybe due to having children. I'm not sure if it's sort of my age, or having children, or having lost both of my parents, or the pandemic. All of these things seem to come together at a similar time. And I suddenly realised, I've always been creative, but I suddenly realised it's more than, there's a sort of hunger that I have to fulfil. I need to be creative. It's really important. It's part of my identity. So, yes, I'm very, very grateful to Mothers on the Mic.
Amazing. There were lots of nodding heads there when you talked about doing accessing a course or accessing anything, I suppose, with a 5-week-old baby or any young child. My children are older now, they're 12 and 14, and like the idea of doing anything when the children were that small horrifies me a little bit, like the exhaustion and the kind of fear and panic of going out and about, but also I connect with the idea of needing to do something that reminds you of who you are and what you want. So is that, this is open to everybody on the panel, is that something that you feel is a necessity, or is it still frightening?
Did you feel frightened coming along?
I didn't. I think because I'd been to online but also face-to-face Mothers Who Make Exeter peer support meetings, I was aware of the principles, and I was aware of the incredibly supportive community that I was entering. So it was actually a relief. I mean, if I hadn't had that, I can't really say, but it was a relief. I knew that going, I live out in the countryside, I knew that getting my baby into the car and getting there, I didn't have to be on time. It didn't matter if my baby cried, no one was judging me. It's just such a welcoming community. And it felt quite different to other baby groups that I've been to. And that's not, I don't want to be negative about any of the other baby groups that I've been to, but the focus was very much on the babies. And then, as mothers, I feel like we didn't really have these sorts of conversations, which are really important and a part of, again, figuring out your identity. Yeah. These conversations keep reaffirming our identities, who we are, what we need. So I already knew it was going to be a welcoming environment, really.
Like, it's not always straightforward. Like, you might have days where your children don't want to be in the room, and then that's okay too. And you have to... We always say, like, whatever you are doing shouldn't compromise your caring roles. And I have to question that myself, because often I have my children with me, and my son's 2 now, and when I hold these spaces, he's at the point where he just wants to go. So I'm now looking at how I can run these spaces, and it's okay for me to go, which feels really radical to say, actually, I need to leave. I'm obviously doing that carefully, and so I've set it up that now we are a collective of facilitators, so we'll always have 2 of us in the space, and it might be that I have to go half an hour early, and that the rest of them will carry it on. And that the group know how to hold those spaces if something like that happened. But it's about an honesty and not feeling like you need to pretend. And I think I connect with what you're saying about the baby groups, because often you don't even get to meet other people by name. You know the children's names, and then you don't know the parents' names. You have no idea what their career is, who their partner might be, you just know how the baby slept that night, or how the toddler's eating or peeing or whatever, and you know so much so quickly about that aspect, and it's like lifting a veil, I think, when you have permission to just be yourself, and then you're in a place where you feel welcome, and then it's okay, whatever happens, and it's okay to not turn up if it's not right for you that day. So I hope in setting up those sorts of permissions, it allows people to come, but there's so many barriers to even getting in the room. We've just got to keep talking about it, keep bringing a friend along, keep challenging why people aren't coming, and what their barriers are.
I'd like to invite another interruption, if we can.
So this piece is about a piece of clothing. It's a tiny newborn baby grow that we use to dress each of our 3 children just after birth. You know, that moment when your world has changed and you're a bit out there. And it's about the power of what that piece of clothing can bring. It's called We Fumble with Poppers, remembering the little red baby grow. You wobble and stare. I jelly and wince. Our warm blood line. What now? Birth warrior victorious, I fumble with poppers. Keep him warm. Words, air, fear, pop, pop, pop. But how? I see it packed in hospital bag the 2nd. Chest tightens. We know. Tiny outfit sniffed brings crashing wave of love. I see it left in bin bag after the lost one. Life is not symmetrical. I see it on my third baby, almost too small for his arrival. We dress each child like dolls, sing verses of bright red cotton, each time as helpless, each time as infinite, hearts swollen and split like new. One plain red baby grow, two minds blown, three heads cradled, pop, 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 again and again and again.
Thank you, Micha. Kate. Hi. I'd like to ask you to step up if you don't mind. I think it would be a great way to introduce yourself if you could do your, if you could share with us a little piece of work.
Bit of work? Yeah, of course. So in the autumn, I was lucky to be part of an artist development programme where I created a piece of work, and I would never have done it if I hadn't been doing the Mothers on the Mic work with Lizzy. Really gave me the opportunity to develop some artistic practice that as a facilitator I'd mostly been focusing on developing other people in the community's work, and it was such a joy to have a chance to work on something myself. This is a piece I wrote and performed. It's a little excerpt from kind of the middle of it. It's about my experience with my wife of trying to conceive, multiple loss, IVF, and the kind of challenges of a very straight, a very heteronormative medical space in that sphere. So I'll share a bit with you.
Are you comfortable here, or would you
Oh,
like to
I've got
stand up?
yeah, why not? I say to the doctor, my diagnosis is shit luck. And she asks me where I trained. And the people who assume I'm a sister or a friend because that's more obvious or easier to them than wife. You know, years ago, a dentist thought I was her mum. Me 22, her 21. We've learned to, and this is my wife Kate, before we're even through the door, because the last thing you need when you're bleeding and weeping and numb is for the person not to understand that you're the other mum. I go to the miscarriage support service after our fourth loss, cold January grey, 2-month wait. I'm polite, they're at a loss what to say, except, I'm sorry, but we support women who've lost babies. And I say, like me, and choking on their heteronormativity, they say, no, the women who've actually lost them. And later I explain, my eggs in her womb, 2 mums, bodies fused, they say, oh, so it really was your baby too. Fuck you and your hierarchy of motherhood and the box I don't fit in because the skin I'm sitting in wasn't the home to our babies at the moment that you're counting. And I'm far too polite for inside, I'm shouting and I do what sits more naturally with me. I write to their trustees. And they send me a letter. Say they're committed regardless of age, race or gender, but still I don't count. Though the losses stack up, the rhythm of our lives put up and shut up, pay up, pay up. I was so proud of myself when I learned it. It was a 15-minute piece, and I thought there was no way, that's obviously a small part from it, I thought there's no way I'll learn this off by heart. I'd had this Mary Oliver poem I was trying to learn off by heart and I just couldn't do it. So I thought there's no way I'll learn 15 minutes of my own piece. But I listened to it, I recorded myself doing it, put it into headphones and pushing a buggy up a very steep hill. I found it was in my brain, and it turns out it still is. So that's nice.
It's so powerful. I watched the 15-minute version that Lizzy sent over last week. And I cried and I laughed in that, and you've managed to make me cry and laugh in 1.5 minutes as well. So
beautiful educate as well, don't you think? Because
Thank
you're really
you.
using people through an experience that they might have no experience of.
And I'm glad I stood up, because it was. I find it helpful to see the faces of the people who are generously in this room with us today, because those moments of like outrage or identification feel so important. Actually, there is something really. We've been very, and I hate to say we've been lucky. We've been so lucky as two women to be accepted both as mothers, right? Because actually that's, I'm not in a space where I want to, like I said, kneel down in gratitude for that. But I still do feel like, that sense of, you want to feel safe and you want to feel included, and it is a real disappointment to maybe use a not quite strong enough word, when in some spaces that is not the case, and in those spaces where actually you're there to be cared for, and that sense where when we are experiencing miscarriage, or in those spaces where it feels so critical to be cared for, to feel that there's also that sense that you also need to exert your identity as a mother.
You have 2 young children.
One is 7 weeks old. Today, 7 weeks today.
Well done for being here.
Thank you.
How has that affected your practice? I know that your current research is looking at aesthetics of care. Is that something that has come through becoming a parent yourself, or is that something you were already looking at in the work?
I think actually it all comes together in different ways, and I think my previous work, working in prisons or in addiction recovery services, mental health services, using creative arts, particularly creative writing and drama, has been about storytelling and people's experiences. And then being pregnant in lockdown, things actually became a bit more accessible because some things went online. So I did a creative writing course, and that was amazing. And then it would have been really sad not to have been able to continue it, but because of Mothers Who Make in Exeter, was able then to join things afterwards, which was such a relief, as Amy says. I think relief is the right word. But I found myself wanting to write about our experiences of motherhood and attempted motherhood. And it comes through, hopefully, a little bit in that piece as well, about storytelling in care settings. And as it happened, my PhD was writing about storytelling in care and embodied experiences of healthcare encounters, but specifically looking at the transition between child and adolescent and adult mental health services, and young people's experience of that transition, which is very bad. It's been identified by the NHS as a key priority for essential change many years ago. But within my research, I also draw my own experience of service user transition. So in all of my work, I draw on that lived experience. In my academic work, that felt very vulnerable to do, because I was positioning myself as a researcher, as a creator, as an artist, and as a service user. And that felt like a very vulnerable space to be in. So perhaps I've been navigating those terrains a lot in my creative practice, and that sense of the power of vulnerability and the importance of it. And when you do take those steps, it's been amazing with some of the kind of Mothers on the Mic events, and those moments where people do come up and say, "Oh, I had IVF," like that's their opener. I've had a miscarriage, thank you. And actually, that feels really important. So it feels important across all aspects of my work.
Amy and Kate, you have both talked about, or you've mentioned to me that fertility, that journey, the huge challenges of it, as well as IVF and miscarriage. That kind of thing has come up in your writing. You've used those personal experiences. Is that something that just came because of the timing for you, with terms of the Mothers Who Makes groups, or how were those spaces facilitated, I guess, that meant that you felt safe to talk about those topics, and then also not only just talk about them but become creative through them?
I think I've been in a space where it's the thing I need to say, and almost you can't say anything else. I could probably write a poem about a tree, but I don't know how. I mean, I do. I'm sure I would love to. I think trees are beautiful. But I think it might end up. I don't know. I think I was in that space where that sense of the urgency and the kind of embodied experience was just, it was so close to the surface, not in like an unsafe way, and perhaps obviously being there holding a toddler or whatever, it makes it easier to share some other aspects as well. But I think because it's a space where, Lizzy always expresses it's a radical space of openness and honesty and engagement, and a place where you can show up as your whole self, then we've tried to show up as our whole selves, I think. It's rude not to.
We also talk about it as a piece of ongoing research, daily research that we're all undertaking, that we are all navigators in this, and that we're, there's no one way of doing it, there's no perfection that you're aiming for, it's daily research. So some days are going to be better than others, and other days you'll have really brilliant balance, or you'll be more on the mothering side or more on the artistic side, and other days it will be really, really challenging. And if we talk about that, it makes it easier for everyone, because if we keep putting each other on pedestals of what motherhood or being an artist should look like, we don't progress. So if we're honest with each other and we cut through the shit, I think, with Mothers Who Make, we get down and dirty pretty quick and trust each other pretty quick. So I think it gives permission to be yourself, yeah.
But I think it never encourages people to step beyond what's comfortable for them, though. I think that is important, isn't it? Because, it's not a therapy space. It's a space that allows for a therapeutic experience.
Yeah. People do say it feels like therapy, but without the price tag. But that's the power of being heard and being supported by a network of people that get it. They might not have the same experiences, but there's points of connection and resonance that are really, really important.
Amy, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I think it's about finding your voice, which I felt very strongly through both maternal journal, which I did this last year as well, and Mothers on the Mic. I felt that I found a voice. So with my fertility journey, I'd actually hadn't spoken about it. And I remember someone saying to me when I was pregnant with my first child, and I was saying, oh gosh, I've been through 8 years of all this trauma. And also found that the clinics, although I'm grateful, a lot of the language they used was very upsetting. I remember once a consultant said to me, you might have to face up to the fact that it's game over. So there's quite a lot of, and she also likened my body once to like a cupboard of tins, saying that I only had one tin left. So a lot of the rhetoric and language was really traumatic, and I think I sort of suppressed it all. And someone said to me, don't worry, when you have your child, you'll forget about it all will all be in the past. And I actually did for a while, and then it was actually going to maternal journal, and I had no intention of exploring this, where it just kept coming up. Every single session, this fertility journey kept coming up, and it was really, really helpful actually to process it and write about it and think about it and talk about it. So having a voice, I think it's good to have a voice and know how to use it, really.
It sounds like these sessions are, the peer support as well, it's almost like a residency space. I'm quite jealous. I haven't had that. I have to move to Exeter.
Occupy space, and the first time we did Mothers on the Mic, you could see the staff at the Phoenix looking in because we were making so much noise. And it's the middle of the day, and it's like, what is happening? And people are cheering, and I've got pictures of people with their arms in the air because they felt euphoric at hearing their stories reflected back at them, or it was like an outpouring of emotion. And it's we need to occupy these spaces and we need to be seen. That's why we always hold them in arts spaces, apart from maternal journal, which we've held in places that people are already going where they will be taking their babies, because we want them to feel really comfortable. But when we're looking at talking about ourselves as mother artists, we need to be very, very welcome in our local arts venues and not always on the fringes. So it's really important we occupy those spaces.
Can I invite another interruption, please? Thank you.
Pregnant with the sky. 1. Gaia is growing. A seed placed inside begins to stir and unfurl. 2. She chews on ginger, a dancing twist of nausea in her molten core. 3. Exhaustion stretches like a grey cat sat heavy on stooped hill shoulders. 4. Pockets of magic bubble up in dark places. Internal nutshell. 5. Those wing-like flutters quickening inside tremors steal her 7 winds. 6. Dark paths of stretch marks meander down soft earth thighs, carving out new lands. 7. Sleep evades her now, and when she catches its tail, restless, stormy dreams. 8. Round, aching fullness. Swollen river ankles wade through thick, dragging days. 9. Anticipation. Soon she will split herself wide as the stars come out.
Gee, the other thing about all the Mothers on the Mic events is just everything's so good. It's not just points of connection, is it? It's just actually getting to join and experience a brilliant cultural and artistic experience.
Absolutely. Hearing work and sharing work. Every month are you doing this?
Well, so the peer support meetings happen on a monthly basis, and the Mothers on the Mic projects, I've done 9 live shows in the last year, and the money's just run out, so I'm looking at what we do next, but people want more of it, and it's been in small scale venues, but we've sold out every single one, so we've had between 50 and 70 people, plus 30 to 40 children at a time. And it's we had Holly McNish for a gig in February, and it sold out in 3 hours, 5 months in advance. I did 2 social media posts, and it was sold out with a massive waiting list. So I think there's a real appetite for daytime, accessible work. So I would really like to see in Exeter a monthly comedy club, monthly poetry open mics. You know, I don't want to be producing it all myself. I want to be programming exciting things, and I want venues to start programming people to come and do daytime shows. And I think we can model the way here in Exeter and like change that nationally if we speak loudly enough about it, because there's a huge underserved audience, and that actually I think there's money to be made, and they're missing a trick. And then also the artists, you know, wouldn't it be brilliant if a touring artist could go home at the end of the day, or like take their kids on tour with them and not always have to do evening shows? Like, there's so much work to do because we're so underserved. We're just one of the underserved groups, and I think parents really need more support. That didn't answer your question. I just really wanted to talk about that.
Well, it did.
Necessary.
It completely did, but it's. I can see already it's this whole, it's a really holistic approach, because you are thinking about economics, you're thinking about sustainability, you're thinking about artist development, as well as, you know, the sanity of the women involved.
And accessible venues as well, that make it accessible for everybody.
Because actually, so I've worked with 8 different organisations here in the city, and none of them are running daytime accessible performances. None of them are supporting artists who are parents. And so I've introduced all of that to them, and they've been, yes, please, this is a no-brainer. And I thought I was going to have to fight people and say, you know, we need this. And they're like, yeah. When I first pitched Mothers Who Make to Patrick, the artistic director here at the Phoenix, I came with my bag of tools. Like, I was like, I'm going to tell him all about why this is really important and how he has to support us. And he sat down, and we didn't even have our coffees, and he was like, yeah, of course we'll support you, no problem. And I was like, really,
where does all my adrenaline go?
I really want to run. And so, yeah, they've just been so kind. And like the Phoenix, like, gives so much support in kind, and it's really brilliant. They get it.
I'm interested, this is only the second time I visited Exeter. Amy and I went to the Cabin last night. Yeah. We were the oldest people there, and we didn't care. So there was live music going on. There seems to be a lot here, and then you're talking about a huge appetite for cultural, accessible events during the day. Yeah. I come from a town which is really struggling to have enough participation for things to continue, for the arts centre to continue. What do you think it is about Exeter that is either great for cultural appetite, or that's attractive to those who are interested in culture? Is it because of the universities and the courses that do people stay after the drama and theatre degrees? What do you think it is?
They didn't used to, but I think people do stay now. I think it has to be that holistic approach of artist development, venues supporting artists putting on work, that audiences are supported, and that the venues and the organisations work together. We've got quite a few national portfolio organisations now here in Exeter, because there's been a lot more investment here in the southwest. Before the last 10 years, it's been quite desolate. Everybody would leave after university. There was our big theatre spaces up on a hill in the middle of the university. It's really inaccessible. And so there's a lot more strategy and connected thinking about getting people together. But we need producers to be challenging that all the time. We need audiences to articulate what they want. And so I think Mothers Who Make Us sat very nicely within that, because these organisations are talking to each other and supporting and having some financial support from the Arts Council to keep going, that they are in a position to support risk-taking. And I think audiences don't just take a risk and turn up. There's so much work that gets done before an audience gets into that space. Like even how, with Mothers on the Mic, how I communicate what that space is going to look like and how I support the artists who are going to perform. It's a really long journey. You don't just say, oh, there's a parent audience ready-made. You have to work at it. So it's not an easy fix. But I think once the network and the community's there, it explodes. And I'm also not interested in sort of sitting as a leader on top of this movement forever. I just want to enable people to become confident in their own ideas. And like one of the reasons there's not many people here today is that there's a group called Strummy Mummies that has been born out of one of the groups that have been running, and that's happening simultaneously. And loads of the maternal journal groups couldn't meet today because they're meeting around someone's house having lunch doing journaling. So they're busy, and it's perfect. That's it's fine. We need to keep growing the audience, but you can't just sit on a network and say that's done.
They agree.
The ripple effect of the collaborations that emerge and what people then go on to do. It doesn't even have to be centred around motherhood. If they feel empowered to go on and do the thing that they want to do because they've been part of this space, that is success. And then I'm interested in working with where the gaps are and keeping those things growing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Micha, can we invite another interruption?
So this next poem is about a relationship that was born out of Mothers Who Make, a friendship and a creative collaboration that I made with Jess Timmis, who's a fantastic visual artist. And we were working together a lot through the pandemic, and she found out that she was being chucked out of her studio, and I wanted to do something, and I was far away, so she probably needed a room, but I wrote her a poem. It's called Obsidian Oblivion, a poem for Jess. The black obsidian fits inside my palm, a key, silent as a pool. It landed in my hand at sunset on a not-quite beach. Nancy drew a map. Gabriel found stones. We gulped down daylight wine and the enormity of each other, while the wind blew laughter up our skirts and softened the corners of our meeting. I gripped the slippery darkness, too smooth for pebble, too skulking for gemstone, to reveal a seal swimming through pink seas, laying eggs in suitcases lined with marl. Touch me, it barks, a whispered invitation. You gave me this stone, sitting side by side after months of screams. We enter labyrinths together, you holy witch, mother of magic, permeable warrior. You silk your words into coils of painted guts. I wind them, matrixial rosary that you birthed. Please let the truth drip through my fingers. Repeat after me, we crack and ebb, we ache and grow. I watch a woven womb tortoising up the hill to begin its endless fall once more. The witch pulls threads through cracks in the wall. That room could not contain you. I hear laughter stream through the window, smashing mugs into oblivion. I taste the bubbling mud of our connection. I see your shadow blazing fire against a kitchen wall. I feel the blackness cupped inside my waiting fist and squeeze my thanks for the enormity of you.
There's such amazing work that's come out of these sessions, Lizzy. It's great.
I'm just wondering what Jess said. Did you perform that to Jess?
I sent it to her. Yeah. She said she had a little cry.
Amazing to have a poem written for you.
Yeah. Amy, you told me that the comedy that you did last year was like your first foray into that. How has that felt as a new form, and also how are you feeling currently about your work, your practice, motherhood, going, I guess, getting back more into things at some point? What, will things have changed? What are you... There's lots of questions there. Sorry, answer what you like.
The comedy was really, really exciting, and I initially wanted to explore comedy to bring it into my writing, because my writing, and I've done some storytelling, it's always quite heavy and emotional and serious, so I thought I'd bring some comedy in. I didn't initially intend to perform, but I really enjoyed the performance.
She was so brilliant. She's a natural.
And it's had quite a positive response. So quite a few family and friends are sort of asking, are you going to continue with this? But in relation to what we've just been speaking about, I've looked into open mic nights for comedy, and a lot of it is in the evening, and it's proving quite difficult now. And I said, well, it was brilliant the way, Lizzy sort of set it up. That was brilliant during the day, children welcome, but it is a bit more difficult, I think, to pursue now. So it's something I'd like to come back to. But since then, I've also done other work, and I'm always making something. So at the moment, I'm working on some poetry, and I'm writing a play. So I've always got something in the making. But the thing, my real struggle is going back to the day job, speech and language therapy assistant, which is sort of tenuously linked, in terms of communication, connection, and language. But I'm going back to that in a couple of weeks, and I'm already lamenting the loss of this time, really, with my children, and to be creative. So that's good. I think the finding time for creativity and motherhood works for me, because I've always worked well in what I've read someone else describe as short, sharp bursts like sunshine. And I think that's always, I'm such a procrastinator that I have always worked in these kind of spaces. So that's worked well with motherhood, but now throwing in the day job, which takes a lot of energy, that's the challenge for me, of how to maintain that identity as an artist, really, in that context. So we shall see.
Really, you're a powerhouse, but that really resonates. The power of doing things quickly. Turns out I can do things in a much smaller amount of time than I thought I could, in terms of getting stuff out there. But I think it's that sense of the force of the energy sometimes, isn't it?
Yes.
Actually, it expands to fill the time that you have, and it can be an eruption, can't it?
Lends itself well, I think, to creative, eruptions.
And I don't know, tying in with parenthood as a creative experience as well. One of my friends who, after we had our first baby, came round and hadn't had much experience around small children. And she's she's a performer, movement artist, researcher. And she said, oh, it's like contact improvisation. And it was my favourite description of parenting. Parenting is contact improvisation. And I thought that was quite beautiful. And I think that now, when I'm balancing many things, literally and figuratively.
Someone once came to one of our meetings and was talking about that she used to do really large-scale artworks, and then when she became a parent, she didn't have a studio anymore, she didn't have space in her home became very much around parenting, and so she started doing quick sketches over the breakfast table, and it was about scaling things down but them still having power and resonance for her, and her practice had just adapted to the given circumstances, because so often we try and say we have to be exactly the way we were before parenthood, and it's not possible and you evolve into something new. And so being open to those possibilities of what the newness brings and how it fits with your life is, I think, part of the ongoing conversation and research with yourself.
And I think there's something really powerful that you say, Lizzy, about slowness actually, and those moments in your email signature about replying, when you get the chance.
Yeah, I'm
so
trying
don't
to
rush
change.
me.
Even though I'm running as fast as I fucking can, and I'm working so hard, I'm probably not going to reply that quickly. It might be that I've had 2 office days in the next 3 weeks, and so actually I'm replying in a very timely manner, but actually it might take me 3 weeks rather than 3 days to get back to you. And I'm trying to talk about working slowly as a conscious practice, because it's not slowness in terms of I'm taking my time, it's I'm working alongside being a full-time parent as well. And so I put that in my email signature, and someone did interpret it like I was being very, very mindful of like my well-being and resting a lot, and I was like, I'm not resting much at all, but she probably should be. But she talked, I put something about I work in between my children napping and things like that, and she was like, it's so great you take naps. So I don't take naps, I'm so sleep deprived. I was like, that's fine if she took the positive from it anyway.
Maybe email signatures need to be like a video play of, fast forward of what the days look like, and say, I'm fitting you in like the 2 minutes here and there. That's.
I got my PhD 2 months before I gave birth, and I have got this feeling of, thank you very much, of that sense of kind of anxiety about lack of publishing my work, and then I have to remind myself that actually I've been quite busy. But it is existing within these worlds where there are multiple pressures, and I do have to sometimes repeat to myself the mantra, our babies they'll be this size just right now. So there's time.
Yeah,
there's time.
there is.
I think it's important to nurture both sides of like being present with your children, but also showing your children that you are a whole person and that you're not just mother or parent. And so like, look how quiet the kids are today. Right? They have the total opportunity to run around the room and be loud if they want to be. You're
all being amazing.
Yeah. But you're calm and you're chilled and you're playing and you're welcome, and hopefully your parents will relax too. And like, it's important for me, it's really important my daughter sees me doing something I love, and that I am trying to forge a career for myself in a way that's meaningful, because I would want that for her. And if I'm going to work doing a 9 to 5 and I'm not seeing her as much as I want to, and I'm constantly telling her about how tired I am and how I hate my job, like, what message is that giving her? So I'm not saying that that's everyone, but that's how I would feel if I was doing something that didn't sit well with me. So I want to model being myself in front of her. Something.
I think that's really important, and my mother did that as well, actually. I've always been really grateful to my mum for doing that. So she, had the day job, saw her doing the housework, but I also saw her writing, and she also did some part-time acting. So I always saw her as Janet, as herself as well.
Well, I think that you briefly mentioned, I can't remember in what point, about modelling child-friendly spaces. It's that kind of thing as well. It's not only about appreciating the time with your children, but it's about modelling, different working spaces, different working patterns. That it doesn't just affect mothers. It affects anyone who's a parent, and actually anyone who has caring responsibilities. So that if we become more flexible in those spaces, in those schedules, in how we respond to work-related patterns, it becomes more the norm. So it's more accessible for everybody and more pleasurable, hopefully.
I think if we can't model it in the arts, where can we? We need to be change makers. We need to be showing the world how we can do it, so that the politicians and the employers of big business are listening, and we need to show them what it looks like first, because we are visionaries as artists. We can create new ways of being. We're constantly reinventing the world to make it a better place. And like the pandemic, as awful as it was, there was some really, like Kate said earlier, about being able to access things online. We need to keep learning from that, and people working at home with their children being present and being part of a work meeting. We need to retain those things and keep learning from them, because that doesn't have to be the norm. We can forge new ways of doing this.
Business as usual is a very patriarchal, heteronormative, cis-white, construct, isn't it? Let's not do that.
Let's not do that. Mothers are amazing. Mothers and artists. I mean that's a powerful concoction, right? In terms of shaping the world.
So the last thing I want to say before we have our final interruption, and then we can have some Q&A if people are still available, is now I completely lost my thread of thought as you said that. That's quite general.
You can edit yourself saying it.
I can edit me. It's fine. No, it's gone. So instead...
Well, let's also embrace the sleep deprivation in the room, right? I think actually there's something... I've been at work... Yeah, lots of hands went up. I remember going back to work after... I took a fairly short maternity leave after our first baby, and Jen just losing words, standing in front of a room full of students and going, the word begins with the letter S. It's like sign. It was semiotics. They didn't guess it.
At least that's a slightly tricky word. Right, I forgot what a television was, and I was going, the thing that we look at in the corner of the room. The thing. Yeah.
But there's something. It's important, isn't it, to let everybody be in the room as they are, I suppose.
I was going to say it's also really important to remember those who aren't in the room, who can't come to spaces like this, those who don't have the luxury of maternity leave or flexibility in their working, and making sure that there is a way for finding new patterns and new ways for people, for women who are parents as well, who don't have the opportunity to come and share their own challenges.
Really important. Really important.
Laura Godfrey-Isaacs, who founded Maternal Journal, spoke recently about, I don't know what the effect is called, a baby brain, I can't remember, but she was talking about the people that aren't in the room. Often, the people that ask for help are, how did she put it? So many people don't even, the most needy, the people that need it the most aren't the ones that will seek out what you're offering. So, with something like Mothers Who Make, we're probably only reaching a really small portion of people that are prepared to put themselves forward and ask these questions of themselves, and we need to work on who's not in the room and why, and because they're going to need it even more, probably.
But you are running a Sunday night online session, aren't you? So you've already thought about it as well. My very, very first interaction with Mothers Who Make was a friend inviting me to come when we were in our experience of fertility treatment, and I didn't feel like I wanted to, but it was made clear to me that I was already perceived as very much welcome in a mothering space, which is powerful, even if that didn't feel like a thing that I didn't want to enter that space.
I understand that. We also have people who come to Mothers Who Make who haven't got living children, or who have decided to be childless, and have conversations around that, because that's so welcome and important. If they feel comfortable in that space, the space is for them. Or they want to talk about their relationships to their own mothers, or what motherhood might mean for them if they choose to become mothers. I'm really interested in having conversations early in people's careers to think about how motherhood might sit alongside it, because you have to start articulating it early on. Otherwise, you're expected to give things up, or you're expected to take a small break and then come back like you don't have kids. And we need to have conversations with people right at the start of their careers, so they're having those conversations with their employers about, and changing it for the people around them as well. It's big work, and we're all responsible for doing it.
We were in receipt of universal credit, and we were told that after our baby was born, my wife needed to go to the job centre to prove that the baby had been born, to take something physically, and we were like, can we not just upload something online, like normal people? And they said, no, you've got to come. You've got to come in. Should I just have a C-section? Just consent your wife, that's okay. But yeah, they're not always the most the most thought through bureaucratic systems either.
Yeah. I think that would be a great point to have our final interruption. That's okay.
This is not the poem that I was planning to do. I hope that's okay. It's something that was inspired by listening to the talk. And it's called Reflections on the Artistic Process. I write on my phone, in fragments and fag ends of time, thumbs clicking out little moments of something or nothing. I write on my phone, and I think of the sleek laptop I want, of the pot plant and the tea mug and the pleasing view of greenery or of water. I write on my phone in bed with duvet up to nose, or while poking fish fingers, or with a baby on the boob, or when hiding behind the fridge door with a chocolate biscuit stuffed in my mouth. I write on my phone because it's quicker than my handwriting, more immediate than a pen, because if I don't write it now, I'll forget it in 10 minutes, or I'll have a meal to make, or a nappy to change. I write on my phone and I feel weirdly guilty, like it's not proper writing, just dicking about on Samsung Notes. But I keep going, keep writing on my phone, bits and pieces and bits and bobs, and I don't know what it's for, but I guess it's for me. I write on my phone.
Yeah.
I think that would be a great time to open up if anybody in the audience has any questions for people on panel about Mothers
Just
Who
to
Make.
say, Laura keeps making us cookies because we've just had a baby and she's so kind.
Oh, that's
She left them outside our front door on Monday in our milk thing for our milk.
Oh my God.
I know, it's kind.
That's really lovely.
There you go. We talk about these generative relationships people put together through the power of the arts.
And cookies.
I know.
It's such a joy to hear Laura and Micha's work today, and I think that's, even though talking about it is important, when you hear something conveyed through art, whether it's poetry or comedy, like it gets right, it cuts through the shit, it gets right to the heart of it, and it all feels possible and amazing. I just think.
When I worked in Winchester prison, one of the men in the prison said, I just want somebody in the audience to come and to think they've experienced a piece of art, something beautiful, maybe uplifting, and not with the caveat, you know, that would be good for prisoners, for example. And I think there's something really important with the work that we've been hearing today as well, about recognising kind of the brilliance of it in and of itself. It's not just like, oh, it's lovely mother poetry, right? You know, but actually, it's really important to recognise the power of the arts.
And that these are professional artists and who are mothers and
Not dicking about on their phone.
Not dicking about on their phone.
Although that's fine too,
Most
right?
artists dick about in some ways.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of playing.
Hi, Micha.
Sorry if this is a bit of a curveball question, so it's fine if you don't have an answer at all things, but I suppose hearing you guys talk, there's a lot about that sense of personal change and societal change that needs to happen within it, and I'm aware that there's also a bigger umbrella of change to do with the climate emergency, and I just would be interested in hearing reflections on how you feel this sort of power house group of mother artists, us as a collective. Are there any thoughts or reflections on how we respond, how we take action, where we fit in the bigger changes happening around?
So I'm just going to try and summarise that just for the recording. Good luck, Susan. So as a group, Mothers Who Make already think about kind of local change, change for themselves, individual change, and then we've talked about societal, structural change, but also how can we reflect on climate change and the climate crisis at the moment as a group. How can Mothers Who Make begin to reflect on that?
It's not quite, it's not the perfect answer to your question, but one thing I've been thinking about is, well, we've been talking about arts and well-being and health, and I think we must think about health in a more expansive and, again, less neoliberal, less colonial view. And I've recently designed a new MA in Arts, Health and Wellbeing, and while I've been thinking about these terms, health and wellbeing, I've been really conscious to include planetary health and social health and the world that we live in, if we focus on health as a very individualised experience, we don't think about the health of communities and we don't think about the health of our planet. And I think that that's something that's necessary for all of us to do. So when we're even just considering things like health and well-being, and we're talking about the arts, we need to think about that kind of expansive understanding of the well-being of our world.
I think the power of our voices and our artwork can instigate those changes and those conversations, and lots of people within the Mothers Who Make network are asking those questions, or they're bringing that into their practice. I don't have a perfect answer because it feels huge and it feels really scary, but I think we're used to being in places where we can keep challenging and questioning and forging new ways of being, so we all have to take responsibility for those changes. But I think in bringing it into the artwork and instigating those conversations, we're well placed to do it. Yeah.
I think what we're doing already is kind of preparing for what's to come. So maybe in the future these kind of more localised groups will be really necessary where we come together and connect. So we're kind of already creating those skills that will equip us better for the future, maybe just a little.
We need to be creative in our response to climate emergency and climate justice. We need creative solutions. And women around the world are doing the most incredible things to combat climate emergency that aren't as celebrated, I think, perhaps as they could be. Yeah. But we do need a creative vision. There's the hot poets who write, who work with climate scientists and poets to create work to kind of educate, inform and inspire with regards to climate and climate emergency. So that's a brilliant piece of work that's happening. But we need creative solutions, and they were invited by the UN to bring that vision, to bring that creative vision.
Yeah, we need artists in the room.
Imagination, and we are in a context where the arts are, systematically devalued within our education system, and yet we know the power of them, and we know that for a better future we need creative and imaginative and problem solving. We need that thinking. We need those. They're not soft skills. They're fucking critical skills.
Yeah. I'm going to add in a little bit there as well about the small things we can do, like sharing, like the Mothers Who Make are doing constantly, what Amy and I are trying to do with the podcast, sharing people's experiences, sharing what people are doing on a wide variety of topics, and keeping those archives so that we have those experiences and those conversations recorded in some way so that other people can hear about it, learn about it, talk about it, and keep the ball rolling, really.
And in Lizzy's invitations to the events, you do include a thing saying, about being mindful of the way that you journey.
There's so much work to do, isn't there? And I think, everybody needs to keep imagining and forging new ways of being, and not just accepting the status quo or expecting other people to do it. We are really well placed to do this work, and we have lots of skills and imagination, and our children are at the centre of our worlds, and we want to create worlds that are sustainable and healthy for their future. And when you look at something like Mothers Who Make that operates at a very hyper-local level, you can see the power of that change happening. And so we need to transpose those things into the conversations we're having with employers, with local councils and governments, and understanding the power of our voices, and that it doesn't have to be massive global change. It can be at a very local level, very, very impactful, and that ripple effect that Mothers Who Make has can also happen, I think, with the climate as well. Look at Greta Thunberg. We can all be Gretas in our local areas, and it's the same with being mother artists. I think we have the power to make those changes.
I'd like to say a really big thank you to the audience for coming and listening to the episode, to Micha and Laura for sharing their fantastic work, and to Lizzy and Amy and Kate for giving their time, having a conversation with us and sharing some work. So can we have a big...
Can we say a massive thank you to Susan and to Amy for bringing this to us. It's been such a nice... This is the first time we've had this excuse to sit around and talk about this, and it's such a privilege to be invited to do it, so thank you so much.
Amazing, we love it. We love Exeter. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Woman Up. This episode is part of the Woman Up Tour 2023, funded by a National Lottery Project grant from Arts Council England. To hear more of our episodes from this series and any other, please visit any of your usual podcasting platforms. Find Woman Up Podcast and subscribe. Or you can follow us on Instagram at woman.up.podcast.